everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another product review. And the item we have on the workbench today to unbox and look at is another optic. But this one's a little bit different from the ones I've reviewed in the past. Pretty much I have exclusively reviewed red dots, but this one is a prism sight. And it comes from the company that I have been working with for a few months now, Sightmark. Now this has been a great company. They have sent a number of different optics to the channel for review, and I have to say I have been so impressed by them because I think that they hit so far above their price point. They're high quality, but they're relatively affordable. Now this is a prism sight, not a red dot. And of course, because there's a difference, there's going to be pros and cons. And we'll go over all of those when I unbox it. The biggest advantage to a prism sight is that if you have an astigmatism, because the reticles in these are etched instead of projected, they can be more complex and clearer. And that is a huge selling point to a lot of people. So this is the Sightmark Strikon FMP 1x18 Prismatic Sight. So this is going to be a little bit different for me, and I'm really excited to see what's in this box and how it works. We're also going to take it to the range and mount it to this really cool Dara Arms lever action rifle. So let me adjust the camera. Let's open this box and see what we got. So here's the box. The Sightmark Strikon FMP 1x18 Prismatic Sight comes in. We have all of the information on the back and all of its features here on the sides. So let's go over a couple of those. We have true 1x magnification, daylight bright illumination, an aimpoint micro footprint mount, a 10-minute shake awake, automatic brightness adjustment capable, IP67 waterproof and shockproof, 9 daytime brightness settings, 3 night vision brightness settings, and flush adjustments. We also can see what the reticles are supposed to look like. Kind of reminds me of the EOTech Donuts of Death. And we have one for red and one for green. So obviously the illumination can be switched between those two colors. And it says it has an RTR1 rapid targeting reticle. So that's the name of that reticle. So let's open this up and see what we get. Of course, we get the instruction manual, a cloth, get some accessories, some mounting hardware. There is the sight. Looks like we get a battery, some more mounting stuff, and another mount. So we have lots of options in here. Let's go ahead and open this sight up and let's take a look at it. And this definitely feels heftier, and that's something to note when it comes to a prism sight. They are going to weigh more than your typical red dot. So I have to say, this looks and feels really, really nice. Right now the glass looks pretty clear, but once I get it mounted to the rifle, I will double check that. It has another mount here. I have to say, it looks really, really good. We got the adjustments for the elevation and windage, plus the buttons to change the illumination. Now, speaking of those pros and cons of a prism sight over a red dot, let's go over those. I've already mentioned the big one. Because the reticle in this is etched and not projected, it can be more complex and it will be clearer with people with astigmatisms. But one of the downsides to that is that the eye relief of these can be a little bit less forgiving, especially if you have ones with magnification. But since this one doesn't have it, that might not be an issue. Another downside, as I already mentioned, is these are going to weigh a little bit more. But with one like this, that's so small, it's not really going to change all that much. Another pro to this is because that reticle is etched. Even if the illumination turns off, you can still see that reticle in the daytime. So that lighting and that illumination is essentially just a backup if you want it to be a little bit more clear. So unlike a red dot, you don't have to worry about the batteries in these as much. All right, so I need to install that battery. I need to mount this to the rifle. So let me do that. Let me make sure everything works. We'll turn it on, and then after that, we'll take it to the range and see if it works and if it can be adjusted for 0 and hold that 0. So this is what the Sightmark Strikon FMP 1x18 prismatic sight looks like mounted to the Dara Arms RAN Iron Wolf lever action rifle. I think it looks fantastic. The mount is well made and secure. When it comes to installing the battery, we have an aluminum tray here on the bottom of the sight, which is secured by two relatively large screws. And because it's not made of polymer, I am very confident we're not going to have any issues with it. I did install the flash kill to the front of the sight as well. I wanted to test everything out. You don't have to install that, but as I said, I did. And in the rear of the sight, we do have the fine focus or diopter adjustment. And this is actually the perfect rifle to try this out on because this rail on this rifle is so far forward. So my eye relief might be a little bit difficult to attain, but I've already tried it out here in the garage and you have a lot of adjustments here and I was able to get it in focus. So I was a little bit worried about that, but you do get a wide range of adjustments there. So depending on where you mount this on your rifle, I don't think you're going to have any issues. On the side and on the top, we do have the turrets for adjustments. And when you use the supplied tool and you adjust them, you can hear and feel those clicks. I do like that. They definitely do feel very secure. You have the buttons on top to adjust the illumination settings. The only issue I have had with this optic so far is when I read the instruction manual, and if you want to go between the red and blue colored reticle, you are supposed to push these two buttons together very quickly. And I have tried that and I cannot get it to change from the color green. Now that's not going to be too bad because I would run this with the green reticle, but I would like to have that other option. All of the other settings work perfectly. When I try to raise the illumination, it gets very bright. Of course, you can go into the night vision settings, which I don't have any night vision goggles to test it out, but it also does get very dim. So depending on your lighting situation, you have plenty of options there as well. So maybe these buttons just need to be rethought. They are very close together, and with my relatively thick fingers, it's hard to push both those down together at the same time, and that might be what's causing that issue, trying to change the color. But right now, I can't change the color of this reticle, but everything else is working. All right, so that's what this sight looks like, what I've discovered about it, and the only issue I've had with it so far. So now it's time to take this to the range and make sure it works. So our first test is to see how easy this sight is to adjust. So I'm going to put a few rounds through this rifle, discover where it's kind of set at. Then I'm going to use the supplied tool. We're going to adjust for 0, and then we'll proceed to other tests and make sure this is a quality optic. And my first experiences with this optic are very positive. And as I mentioned before, because it's a prismatic sight, there's going to be a little bit more prep you have to do with it as compared to a typical red dot or a green dot. So the first thing I did when I got it to the range was adjust the eyepiece for the eye relief. And I was curious if I was going to be able to get a clear sight picture with it, because on this rifle, the optic has to be mounted so far forward. And I was able to do it. And once I got that eye relief perfect, the reticle was exceptionally clear. I understand why some people prefer prism sights over red dots, especially because I have an astigmatism. The reticle had no streak or no tail, and it is more complex than a projected reticle. Then, after shooting the rifle the first time, I needed to zero the optic. It was easy to do. I used the supplied tool, but you could also use the rim of a case or a screwdriver if needed. I was able to get it dialed in with no problem whatsoever. I'm very impressed with it because the detents are so strong. I really feel confident that it's going to hold zero. So far, just getting this on the rifle and getting it set up, it's running great. So the next test I want to do is simply double the distance of this target. I want to make sure that at various distances, the gun still shoots accurately with this optic. I'm fairly sure it will. And I'll also see if there's anything else about this optic that I like or don't like, and I'll come back here to the garage and tell you all about it. And something I can really appreciate about this optic at further distances is how small the center dot is and how clear the reticle is. One of the complaints I often have with red dots in general is because they're unmagnified, or typically unmagnified, at further distances, that dot can cover up a lot of the target. Here, it's very fine, and I feel like you can get more precise shots with it, especially if you're going to use it on a firearm that's designed to go out to 75 or 100 yards. Typically, anything beyond that, you're going to want something magnified. But that also brings up another shortcoming of a prism sight. The nature of a prism sight means it has a fixed magnification, and typically you see these in 1, 3, or 4 power. So if you are going to shoot at various distances, you might need to go with an LPVO because that's going to give you more options. But with a prism sight, if you're fine with the magnification it's set at, it might be perfect for you. And I really like this type of optic on a rifle like this. I think it would also work great on an AR that's designed for home defense. So far, I feel like this is an awesome option, and I'm really happy with the accuracy I'm able to get with it on this rifle. So now I'm going to try to take as much of the human element out of the equation as possible, shoot this rifle from the bench and from a rest, and just see what the best group I can get with it is with this awesome Sightmark Prism sight. And I'm very happy with the consistent results I'm getting at all distances. And a lot of that I think has to do with the clarity of the reticle. So if you're used to using a typical red dot, maybe on your modern sporting rifle for home defense, this might be a great option. I really think a prism sight has a lot of advantages that I prefer over a typical red dot. But once again, if you're looking for something that's magnified or that you need to change the magnification on, you might want to go in a different direction. But for me, the biggest selling point of this optic is the clarity of that reticle. All right, so the next test I want to do, I call the stress test. Essentially, I'm going to put a bunch of 357 Magnum through this rifle. I want to see if I shoot it a bunch, this mount remains secure, and to also make sure I have no problems with the internal electronics. I don't think I'm going to get any flickering, but of course, I just want to test it out. So let's go back to the range, let's shoot this rifle a little bit faster, and let's make sure this optic will work under a little bit more heavy use. And as expected, I had no problems with the mount. It remains secured. But of course, if you don't like the one that is provided, you can change it out for other things. But I did want to test the one that came in the box, and I have to say, I really like it. As for the optic itself, of course, the reticle remained illuminated, and one of the advantages, as I mentioned before, about a prism sight is because the reticle is etched. If the illumination does go out or your battery runs out of juice, you're still going to be able to use it because you can still see the reticle. That is another huge selling point, I think, to a prism sight over a typical red dot. All right, so the last test I want to run is just to make sure it has held zero. I've put a bunch of rounds through this rifle, so now simply I'm going to redo the first test. I want to see what that group looks like, and then I'll come back here to the garage and give you my final thoughts. And like all of the other Sightmark products I have reviewed, it seems to be durable, well-built, and holds zero. As I mentioned in the opening of this video, I feel like Sightmark optics hit way above their price point. So when you look at the box, it does say designed in Texas, but in full transparency, on the back of this box, it says this one was made in Bulgaria. But it really seems like Sightmark has great quality control. And all the stories I have heard about their customer service have been overwhelmingly positive. I know from just talking to the representatives from this company, they take their reputation very seriously, and they're always going to take care of their customers. So this is just a great company that stands behind their product. So what are my final thoughts with the Sightmark FMP 1x18 Prismatic Sight? Well, this is a great option if you're looking for something different than a standard red dot. There's always going to be pros and cons, but in my opinion, the pros of a prism sight on an unmagnified optic like this on a modern sporting rifle might be the way to go, especially if you have an astigmatism. I also really like the way this optic looks. It just ran great for me, and I'm very impressed with its build quality and reticle clarity. So on my star system, how would I rate the Sightmark FMP 1x18 Prismatic Sight? Well, I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. A very good rating. The only reason I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars is even after a number of days, I can't get the reticle to turn red. It stays green. I've consulted the owner's manual. You're supposed to push both of these buttons together at the same time, and I just can't get it timed right for some reason. I don't know if it's the electronics or just my fingers, but I'm fine with the green reticle. I have no problems with it. I just wish I could change its color. So maybe there's a tip or trick out there that somebody knows, and they can tell me about it in the comments section. So tell me, what are your thoughts on prism sights versus red dots? Do you like the advantages, or do you like the ability to magnify traditional red dots or green dots? What's your preference? And I would love to know what you think about Sightmark, and have you ever used or owned any of their products, and do your experiences with them mirror mine? So, as always, thanks for watching.